Whispers of the Western Sky. The morning Samuel Gray left Kentucky, the air still smelled of gunpowder and wet earth. The Civil War had ended just months ago, and though the nation whispered of peace, the fields were still heavy with the ghosts of conflict. Samuel was 24, wiry and quiet, a man shaped by silence more than words. He had fought for the Union, seen friends buried at Shiloh and Chickamauga, and returned home to find the farm stripped bare by debt and locusts. There was nothing left but memories and a restless longing for something new. The word spreading along the post roads and taverns was railroad. In the summer of 1866, posters pinned to trees and depot doors promised good pay to strong men willing to go west and lay track for the Union Pacific Railroad. $1 a day, they said, and food provided. To Samuel, that sounded like both salvation and escape. He set out with a small satchel, an old army jacket, and a rusted pocket watch. He walked for days, crossing riverbeds and sleeping in barns until he reached Omaha, where the new railhead began. The city was rough and raw, mud streets, tents for saloons, and the unending clang of metal. Men of every kind filled the streets. Irish immigrants with thick accents, black freedmen looking for honest work, soldiers who couldn't shake the habit of drill, gamblers, preachers, and drifters. Samuel signed his name, S. Gray, into a ledger thick with names and numbers. By dawn the next day, he was part of a crew. His job was to carry rail ties and drive spikes into the raw earth as the surveyors marked the line westward. The work was brutal. The sun burned his neck and dust filled his lungs, but in the rhythm of hammer and steel, he found something familiar, the cadence of survival. Weeks melted into months. The track stretched through the flat immensity of Nebraska, a world of wind and distance. The whistle of the temporary trains echoed across prairies where buffalo herds still roamed. Some nights, Samuel and the others would sit around the campfire, the night sky huge and starlit, the crackle of wood blending with the low murmur of men telling stories of home or the women they left behind. One man he came to know well was Liam O'Connor, an Irish foreman with a booming laugh and a temper to match. Liam had fled the potato famine decades earlier and built his strength swinging a hammer in mines and shipyards. He took a liking to Samuel, calling him Silent Sam. Together, they drove spikes through the heart of the prairie. The railroad advanced mile by mile, and with it came settlers, merchants, trappers, and soldiers. But it also crossed lands belonging to others. In the quiet spaces between progress, Samuel heard stories, whole villages of Lakota or Cheyenne forced to move, hunting grounds burned to make way for steel. Once, as the crew passed near the Platte River, he saw a circle of riders appear on the ridge above them. The railroad guards tensed, rifles ready, but the riders only watched. For a long moment, Samuel met the eyes of one, a man painted in ochre, his hair streaming in the wind. Then they turned away, vanishing into the grass. That night Samuel couldn't sleep. The rails gleamed under moonlight, cutting through the land like a wound. By the spring of 1868, the crew had moved into Wyoming territory. The landscape grew harsh, ragged hills, biting cold, and endless miles between sources of water. Yet the pace did not slow. The government had promised massive sums for each completed mile, and both companies, the Union Pacific from the east and the Central Pacific from the west, were racing to claim them. In one snow-blown camp, new workers arrived. Small, stoic men from across the ocean, mostly from Guangdong in southern China. They were laborers for the Central Pacific, brought in to cut tunnels through granite in California and now pushing eastward through the Sierra Nevada. Samuel had never seen men work like them. They cooked together, moved together, rarely spoke except among themselves. They drank tea instead of whiskey and endured the same brutal conditions without complaint. Some of the Irishmen mocked them, but Liam warned, "You'd best save your laughter. Those men will see this railroad finish when you're too sore to lift a hammer." Samuel and one of the Chinese workers, a man about his age named Li Wei, began exchanging gestures. Nods, short waves, silent acknowledgments at the end of long days. They didn't share a language, but they shared something else. The understanding of men who'd left everything behind for a dream they couldn't yet name. As the two rail lines neared each other in Utah territory, excitement buzzed through the workforce. Rumors said the companies would meet at a place called Promontory Summit. Samuel's hands were cracked from years of work, his beard streaked with gray, but he felt young again. On May 10, 1869, he stood among hundreds of workers, soldiers, railroad men, and onlookers. Two locomotives faced each other. Union Pacific's number 119 from the east and Central Pacific's Jupiter from the west. Cameras were set up, reporters milled about, and dignitaries gave speeches about unity and progress. When the time came to drive the last spike, a golden one, hammered into polished wood, there was a hush. Samuel found himself beside Li Wei, both coated in dust and sweat. The dignitaries posed for their photographs, but for the men who had labored through storms and hunger, it meant something more. It meant that they had built a bridge across the wilderness. For the first time, the Atlantic and Pacific were joined. The whistle blew, echoing through the hills. People cheered, hugged, and clapped each other's backs. Li Wei turned to Samuel and gave a small bow. Instinctively, Samuel extended his hand. Li Wei paused, smiled, and shook it. No interpreter was needed. Years passed. The railroad brought people by the millions. Settlers, ranchers, prospectors, dreamers, and those chasing the promise of America. Towns sprang up along the line, and fortunes were made overnight. Samuel stayed on, working as a repairman first, then as a foreman supervising track maintenance. He married a widow he met in Cheyenne, built a small cabin, and watched the wild plains fill with fences and homesteads. But progress brought cost. The buffalo were gone. The native tribes were pushed farther west. The open land that had once meant freedom now bore fences and laws. Sometimes while oiling a locomotive, Samuel would stare at the horizon and wonder if the railroad had bound the land too tightly, if, in linking the oceans, America had lost some part of its untamed soul. In the autumn of 1895, more than 22 years later, Samuel, now an old man, rode the line once more, traveling east to see his grandchildren in St. Louis. The trains were faster now, sleek iron beasts powered by deeper furnaces. As the wheels clicked over the tracks, he felt an odd pride. He had helped build this road. Every mile of it carried his sweat, his youth, his hope. When the train reached Promontory, he stepped down briefly. The once crowded place was nearly empty now, the ceremony long forgotten except for historians. The golden spike had been removed to a museum, but the wind still swept the salt flats, and the tracks, still gleaming under the sun, stretched endlessly in both directions. Samuel stood there alone, hat in hand, listening. The air seemed to hum softly, as if the earth itself remembered. And in that sound, the faint vibration of steel and wind, he could still hear it, the echo of a hammer striking iron, the voices of men from 100 places, and the whisper of the western sky, promising that even the hardest journeys could build something eternal. He smiled then, a tired, knowing smile, and stepped back onto the train. The whistle blew, carrying him forward once more, eastbound now, toward the familiar sound of home.